begin the current Daf Yom Yoma Daf Ches. To begin the bottom of Chazayim Abayis, 2 lines up at the bottom of the Yomah. But the Gemara continues this discussion with the teaching of Rabbi Yochanan that he said that Zar Shesidah Hamarach is Chayiv Misa, and we continue with version number 2. We had said version number 1 of what Rabbi Zer's question was on that, and then we re-amended Rabbi Yochanan's teaching, and then we had Rabbi's question on that regarding the lottery, and then we have a similar sequence, just with a different version of Rabbi Zer. Hashem corresponds to Katzach and the Chesed, and I'm trying to Daf joining us for today's Daf. So one thing we're discussing in today's Daf is when we continue with the next parak. Is going to be the Avodah Yom Kippurim, starting with the service of Yom Kippurim. Regarding the early morning procedure of checking for the morning star in the beginning of daybreak in order to pronounce the beginning of the Avodah. And then Amud Beis, we have some Magadata. We discussed the Tefillah from Avinu, the greatness in Torah of our forefathers, the Shem Mitzvah B'nai Noach, the Shem Mitzvah Gilarai, the Domei B'nai Chai, Berachas Hashem, which means the opposite, Gezel and Dinim. Using Megillah Mitzvahs, the concept that we try to have alacrity and diligence and to quickly do mitzvahs as quick as we can. And Erev Tavshilin is one of the rabbinic mitzvahs, and still Avram Avinu did that mitzvah of Erev Tavshilin, which is to be able to cook from one day to the other day on Yom Tov. To continue with the previous daf that we had mentioned, as we said, that the question was on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan had said that Zar Shesidah, but it was really yesterday, the last daf. It's just version number 2, so it's a lot of repetition. Rabbi Yochanan had said Zar that is Masad Menach. It's on the top of Amud Beis if you want to see it on Chazayim Beis. They said Zar that organism Menach is Gemichayv Misa. On that says the Gemara. Now version number 2. Version number 1 had asked, "Why does Kshir Balayla to be possible Bazar?" And the Gemara got into the whole discussion, and the Gemara said, "You're right. We don't find that's Avodah Balayla Gemichayv Misa." So we remembered it. This version says a different question. Masechet Rabbi Zer says, "Is there an avodah meaning regarding the Sidah Meracha? So it's asking a different question that has after another avodah. Which what do you have to do Masad Meracha? You're not done yet. You have to bring the 2 gizam, the 2 logs of wood. And that should be invalid by Azar, meaning to be Chayiv Misa. How can you say such a thing? So a different question. And that the Gemara continues to have and here there's different girsahs. Rashi says not to have this whole girsah, because the Gemara is asking, V'harei Evam B'Pedarim. What do you mean, Evam B'Pedarim? What do you mean, Evam B'Pedarim? Evam B'Pedarim, the Gemara had already established previously that these are things that are qualified different, but we're going to explain with Taisis. The Gemara is saying, what do you mean, Evam B'Pedarim, that's considered Avodah Tama, even though it has after Trumas Hadeshen, and still you see you're going to be Chayiv Misa. So, what's the shlach? You could see that you could have a Avodah that has a Acharei Avodah, like sacrificing the limbs and the fats, which even though you have to wait till it becomes ashes, it's not done yet. You can still take truma from that ashes and still you see Chayiv Misa. Says, no, say Avodah Yomami. That's considered the end of the Avodah Sayyim. So therefore, that's why it's going to have this chashivas to be Chayiv Misa. But it's meaning, and the one way of interpreting it is that Trumas Hadeshen is not the extension of that. This is the end of that, and that's a new thing. But therefore, that's why you're going to be Chayiv Misa. But what are you going to say with Sidah Meracha, which right after, in that same moment, you're going to have the Gizar Eitzim? It says about Trumas Hadeshen. What do you mean? You have Trumas Hadeshen, which even though after you take the Trumas Hadeshen, you still have to take out the Hitzah Hadeshen. Just taking out that shovelful, that kmitza full, is not the end. You still have to take out the ashes of the whole pile after that. And you see, even though it's Yesh Acharei Avodah Michayv Misa, so the Gemara no Tchilas Avodah Yomami. This is the beginning of the Avodah Sayyim, and therefore it's considered independent from the Tzas Hadeshen. Rabbi Yochanan, he says Kiddush Yodav L'Trumas Hadeshen. Someone sanctifies his hands with Trumas Hadeshen. L'Mocha in Tzach L'Kadosh. The next day it doesn't have to sanctify. Shepar Kiddush Mitchilas Avodah, because you already sanctified the beginning of the Avodah, and therefore this gives it a significance of considered as the Tchilas Avodah, and therefore it's independent of the Tzas Hadeshen, which anyway takes the point that you don't have to do it every single day. So whether you have the gears or not, the Gemara is asking Elikasha. So you have a difficulty in Rabbi Yochanan. Where do you find Yesh Acharei Avodah? According to Rashi, we just didn't have this whole thing. The Gemara was asking straight up. Where do you have Avodah Yesh Acharei Avodah that's not an Avodah Tama to be Chayiv Misa? So Eli Itma Hachi Itma says the Gemara, you're right. As we said in the first version, we're going to amend it. We're going to amend it like this. Amar Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg, he's not talking about if a Zar is Masad Meracha, rather the Zar Shesidah Shnei Gzari Eitzim. If a non-Kohen goes and organizes the 2 logs of wood, then he's going to be Chayiv because Oyel Avodah Tami. That is the concluding service where he finishes the siddur of the maracha, which is the 2 kizarim. That's why you're going to be Chayiv. On that, Masechet Rav, as we had in the first version, the same line of questioning, he says, wait, if that's the case, that you're telling me it's not Avodah Tami, and you tell me that Azaz Chaim Misa by the Shnei Gizari Eitzim, so to buy a pious, so you should have to have a lottery. Why didn't you have a special lottery for the Shnei Gizarim? It's a Chashav Avodah. Says the Gemara, Loi buy a pious? What do you mean? And you think you don't need a lottery? But by the time you learn the rights of Mishazach and Trumas Hadesh, the one that merits a Trumas Hadesh and is in the Shnei Gizari Eitzim, he gets a Shnei Gizari Eitzim. Obviously, there is a lottery for it. What are you saying? There's no lottery. Now, Hachikam, this is what Rav was asking. You find Silabah Fnei Atzma should have its own lottery, shouldn't be part of the Trumas Hadesh. That says the Gemara, no, because I mean, like we had said on the previous daf, on the Mebez, that we said, you're right, it should have its own pious, but we don't because we wanted to fix the Trumas Hadashim. No one's going to come, so you have to incentivize it, and therefore, but you're right, of course, it should have its own thing. Now, as we had said on the first version, the Gemara is asking on the inference of what Rabbi was asking on Rabbi Yechon. It was inferred from Rabbi's question that, oh, now you tell me it's Avodah Tama, and you're telling me that Zal Chaim Misa, so it should have its own pious. It sounds like from Rabbi's questioning that he holds that the two variables you need to have for a pious is Avodah Tama and Zal Chaim Misa. Says the Gemara, is that really so? Remember, is that to say that Avodah Tama, one, that it has to be concluding Avodah, and two, Bezar Chaim Misa, that then buy a pious, then you need a lottery? But Ein Zar Chaim Misa, but if the Zar is not Chaim Misa, Loi buy a pious, then it does not need a lottery? But Vari Shchita, what do you do with Shchita? Shchita Zar is allowed to do, and yet you have a lottery for that? Says the Gemara, as we said in the first version, Shana Shchita is different, it's Avodah di Yommi. Beginning of it's a yom, so never give us to the chashivas. But you're right. If it was, generally, if that would be allowed to do it, we wouldn't make a lottery. It wouldn't be a significant avodah. But says the Gemara regarding the other variable. Remember the avodah tama by pais is that to say that only if it's a concluding avodah needs a lottery. Avodah sheshachar avodah by pais, but it's avodah has after avodah does not need a lottery. But remember darm, what do you do with the limbs and the fats, which is you have trumas adeshin after that avodah. It's not a concluding avodah, and yet you have a lottery for who's going to sacrifice the limbs. So says the Gemara, no seif of the Yomami. It's not considered that you have Trumas Addition after that. That's the beginning of the next day. This is the end of the Avodah Sayayim, and therefore it's not considered like you have something after that. But says the Gemara, Trumas Addition, you have the taking of the ashes, which that's something that you have after the Hitzas Addition, and yet still we see that you do a lottery for it. I thought you only do a lottery for something that is Avodah Tama. Trumas Addition is not the final service in that sequence. You have another thing, you have Hitzas Hadesh. Says, no, that's Mishum Maisa Shahaya, that's because of the story that was, that you're right, we never used to have a pious. And because you're right, it's not Avodah Tama. We made it because it was a fighting and someone was stabbed and this and that.
But the fighting was also because they were trying to make a pious.
No, what happened was they never had a lottery. There's two reasons I think more why, because of Shina, because of this Laila, and then the Oilam said, okay, whoever comes, no one's coming anyway. And suddenly the Oilam started coming. Started fighting, and then someone stabbed. So okay, this is too much. Right? We're gonna make a pious. And then what ended up happening? No one wanted to come then. So it's okay. Don't worry. If you win the Trumas Addition, you'll also get this Shnei Gizayim. But again, because of this, you're right. The Trumas Addition never had a pious. Shemai says, oh, that's what they made. He says, oh, we also learned like this that Siddush Shnei Gizayim, which is the re-amended teaching of Rabbi Yechanan, that he says you can be Chayiv Misa because it's Avodah Tama. I'll prove to you Rabbi Yechanan is right that the Siddush Shnei Gizari Eitzim is Avodah Tama, not like Rav and Levi that we have in the Chopez and Mabez, that they actually didn't count that Avodah for Azar to be Chayiv Misa because they held that actually Siddush Shnei Gizari Eitzim is not considered Avodah Tama because you still after the Siddur Ivar. They considered that as part of the Siddur of organizing that you have to put the limbs on top of the wood. So they held that the wood is not considered Avodah Tama. So I can prove that Rabbi Yechanan is right that no, the Siddush Shnei Gizari Eitzim is considered Avodah Tama. Because of the next Mishnah we're about to read, where the Mamunah said to the people around, Tsuru, go out and see Megiyah's man shchita. So check, is it already time for the shchita? Now, the Ilus man tziddik gizari eitzim, like it doesn't say, go and check if it's time to organize the two logs of wood. Obviously, it's avodas laila. It doesn't have to be done during the daytime, it can be done during the nighttime. Now, if that's the case, that means say it's the end of the Siddur Maracha, because that means the Ivarm, that even if it's put on 20 minutes later, is avodas hayoyim. That must mean it's the beginning of a new avodah and not the conclusion of the Siddur Maracha. Similar to all the answers we gave on this Amid regarding Avasayv Avodah Yomah, Tchilas Avodah Yomah, where it separates. This is day, that night. So you see that Rabbi Yechanan is correct, that it's the end of the night, and then the Ivarm is the beginning of the daytime. So no, it's not a raya. Hach the less let the kanta. It's not true. Really, the truth is that a Siddur Gizarm was actually a daytime avodah, could be, not like Rabbi Yechanan. And therefore then it wouldn't be Avodah Tama because that means afterwards the Siddur Avram is part of the same sequence. But it's why do we say that you have to check for the eitzim if it has to be during the daytime too? I'll tell you why. Because after let's let the katani. By shchita, which is no way of fixing it, we said you got to go check to avoid that problem. But regarding the eitzim, which you could fix it, so we didn't say, but could be that maybe really you did need it during the daytime. You just don't have to check it. We during that we made a mistake. Then we'll go and we'll fix it at the end of the day. Hanalach B'Rishayim, which I return to you the second parak of Masechtas Yoma, parak B'Rishayim, which spoke about essentially primarily the payasis, the different 4 lotteries that they had every single day in the Beis Hamikdash regarding which avodas the Kahanim are going to be doing. And with that we begin the third parak, which this finally starts up until the last parak of this Masechta, the sequence of the avodas Yom Kippurim, of the avodah of the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippurim. Which the title of the parak is that the one in charge says he's the scout, he's the deputy behind the Kohen Gadol. He says to them, Turu, go out and see on the wall or on the roof, get up and check. And it's already time to shech the carbon tamid. In other words,
it was every day. So that
right.
thing was only on Kippur or
no,
every day?
No, so this is every single day. And we're just starting with, but this was a regular day too also. Yom Kippur, they had to be in the carbon tamid too. So they said, go check if the eastern front has illuminated because shechita is possible balayla, like the pasuk Yikri says, b'yom simchachem, on the day that you slaughtered. Now, imegia, if it reached, so haraya, the one who's looking, the outlook, the guy who went up on the roof, he would say bar kai, which is the terminology of like something is shining, which is meaning it's already dawn. Now, Masi ben Shmuel, he says, heir pnei kol mizrach, that he said the whole eastern front is lit up. And then they would ask him, the Gemara is going to explain actually exactly who's saying what, but is it up until that it's illuminated up until Sheba Chevron, all the way till Chevron? And he says, yes, it's all the way up to the eastern front. The Gemara is going to explain, like we said, exactly who's saying what. Now, why do they need someone to get up on the roof and to go out and look? And since when do you need to know, make sure it's morning by getting up on the roof? So says the Gemara, says the Mishnah, because one time what happened is that the illumination of the moon, which was near the time of the morning, was shining. V'dimu sheher mizrach. They thought that it was the eastern front that was lit up from the sun, which comes up in the east. So they slaughtered the carbon tamid. And they took out the carbon to be burnt when they understood that they had shechted by nighttime. So to prevent that from ever happening, they always went and checked to make sure that it was really daytime. Then they took the Kohen Gadol down to Taivel, which it wasn't explaining exactly what aren't you talking about the regular carbon tamid, and what does that have to do that they would take the Kohen Gadol down to Taivel? But they took him down to Taivel. Now, this was the rule in the Beis Hamikdash. Kol ha-mesach es raglav, whoever covers his feet, which basically means to say, like this is where the term gedolim comes from, which means say the big orifice, because the person has 2 orifices where he releases his waste, the excretory system he has in the front and he has in the back. And the gedolim is the big hole, which is the terminology of mesach, is because when a person wants to relieve himself, when he wants to defecate, what he does is that he kneels on his knees, and then he covers his body and his feet, like it says by Shal and Shmuel Aleph, that he covered himself. So it basically means to say, if someone releases excrement, toin tefillah, then he has to go out and taivel himself. Whoever just drops out water, which means he's urinating, and again, we always say more appropriate terminology, that's why we say this type of wording, toin kiddush damiglayim, requires just to wash his hands and his feet from the kir, from the water basin, but he doesn't have to actually go and taivel in the mikveh every time he uses the urinal, but if he relieves himself, he has to go ahead and taivel. Now, continue to days where we have a machlekes regarding what we said when they wanted to shech the carbon tamid, that they have to make sure that it illuminated the roya, make sure that it's morning. So Tanya learned the brisa. Rabbi Shmuel Aimer, he says baruch bar kai. He would say it said a different wording. It was the dawn is shining. Rabbi Kiva says no, ola bar kai, that the dawn has risen, which is more light than barak. Nuchula ben afak shiyayin. He says af bar kai bechevron, that it's even dawn in Chevron. Basa ben Shmuel, Hamamun al Payasa, who was in charge of the lotteries, he said that the words were Heir Pinei Kol HaMizrach Ad Shebechevron. That, as we said, as recorded in the Mishnah, that the whole eastern front has lit up until Chevron, and everyone's saying more and more light. Everyone is saying actually different. There's different opinions about how much it's lit up. Reader Messiah, he says, and it actually sounds like everyone's saying later and later. That's lit up more. He says, Hey, he says, the eastern front is lit up until Chevron, and everyone even went to work already. Meaning, it's like everyone's saying it's more and more lit because they wanted to make sure that it's really morning time. So if that's the case, nogale to it. This is very late. Everyone went to work already. So you missed the boat already. How could you say that there's reason magdim and they're shefting right away? So he's going, no, when we said everyone went lamalachta, it meant lisker poyel coming. He says that everyone went to, when it says that he went lamalachta, not doesn't mean the workers, it means the employers, the balabatim, they went to go find workers on the street corners. That's early in the morning, the guy's waiting there to get a job. That's what we mean to say that they even went lamalachta. Now, Amram Safra, related to this idea about the sun and Zmanim, so Amram Safra says, Sleisid Avram. He says the prayer of Avram Avinu, which actually means his, although Rashi says the word tefillah erev, it doesn't mean Ma'ariv, it means his evening prayer, which refers to Mincha, was Mechimashri Kaisli, was when the walls got darkened, meaning the walls that are facing towards the east, they're whitened from when the sun rises, because it comes from the east. So it shines on the eastern side of that wall. Now, in the beginning of the 7th hour, which is by afternoon, right, by midday, so the sun is on top of the sky, in the middle of the sky, on top of every single person's head, and it doesn't make shining, but what's right beneath it. So the walls are dark because the sun is not shining on any side of the wall, rather it's just shining on the top of the wall, on the thickness of the wall, and the shadow is not going to be on this side of the wall. It only starts when it starts turning afternoon, and that's when it starts. That's why it's called actually erev, because it's already that it starts tilting towards the evening. Which Tosfos Shon asks that what we're talking about, the tefillah of mincha that Avram Avinu, that it started from noon, from chatzos, from midday, when it was the walls were dark because there was no sun, because it was right on top. That's when he would daven mincha. But says Tosfos Shon, but what the Gemara says, the famous Gemara Bracha, the Chavam Beza, Yitzchak was masakin mincha. Like it says, Yitzchak is sort of masal. The says Avram davening mincha. So says interesting tarot. Says Tosfos Shon, he says after his son was masakin, then Avram Avinu also said daven the zunna the masakin given up something good. That's not like it can daven. That's what Rabbeinu Tam says.
So why did we read twice to that wall?
Right. Well, we're going to see the Gemara why Dafka Avram Avinu, because Avram Avinu was great Chachuchim and he knew whatever, but he davened mamash b'chatzos. Now another pshat that he brings from his Rebbe, that no, truth is Avram Avinu, of course he davened shachas. Avram Avinu nishke davened. What the Gemara is going to tell us? He was even came out erev tashilin, but he wasn't misaking it for Klal Yisrael, for his whole family. Zichalayin, they get the chimra, the Allah the mitzvah, but the kinder he didn't do that. That was Yitzchak was misaking. But be that as made, the Gemara says, wait a second. Amr Rav Yosef says, Anam Avram make him enigma. We're going to go and learn from Avram Avinu. Well, what are you teaching us, that we should be as reasonable like Avram Avinu, that we should have mincha from chatzos? Why are you telling us? Why are you telling us that he daven mincha at noontime? So Amr Rav says, what do you mean Tana Gam Avram? The Tana is learning from Avram. Vanan Lagarino, we're not going to learn from Avram Avinu. Where do we find the Tana learning from Avram Avinu? The Tanya, famous halacha, Brisa says the pasuk Yikor b'Yemish min Yimul B'Sar Los, and the 8th day he should circumcise the skin of his foreskin. Malamadis teaches the whole 8th day is fit to do a bris milah. Ella, but we all know when we go to bris milah, we know more often than not. Alacrity is we do first as early as we do the mitzvah. Like says the pasuk, Avram Avinu, vayashkem Avram ba'boiker vayachmesh v'goymer. Avram Avinu got up early in the morning and he saddled his donkey, etc. So that's why we do bris milah early in the morning. So what's the question that you're asking over here? So El Maravi says, I'll tell you what. Rabbi Yosef Hokokashli, and what was bothering Rabbi Yosef was like this. The non-learned Mishnah Mesachim that says, if Chal Arvik Pesachim Leis Erev Shabbos, if Erev Pesach is on Erev Shabbos, so you have to do the Tamashal Beit Habayim as early as possible, because you have to chef the Pesach after Tamashal Beit Habayim, and you have to roast it when it's still daytime, because you can't do it on that night, which is already Shabbos, not Yom Tov, it's Shabbos. So the Gemara says, so then we do based on the earliest time that we can do it, which is from when the shade starts moving towards the evening. Which, when is that? So the nishchat, you slaughter the carbon tamid b'sheish nefza, which is in 6.5 hours into the day, which is at 12:30. V'kar b'sheva nefza, and then you sacrifice it an hour later in 7.5 hours into the day. Now the problem is, but if you tell me from the moment when the walls get dark, it's called ben abayim, which is literally noontime. So why don't you shecht it earlier, a half hour early when the walls get dark, which is the beginning of the 7th hour? Over here. Why are you saying that they would only do the carbon tummy, which is also when we daven mincha, which is only from a half hour later? So my question, what's the difficulty? I'll give you 3 reasons why we only did it at, so to speak, 12:30, 6.5 hours, and not at after 6 hours in the day. Because I'll tell you, maybe the walls of the Beis Hamikdash were b'sheisha nefs. Maybe the walls over there only got dark when it was 6.5 hours into the day. What do you mean? Because the walls weren't precise. They weren't exactly straight up. So since the walls were wide on the bottom, and they would get narrower as the walls went up, higher up. So therefore, the point of the edge of the thickness on the top is not going to have shade on the straight up point to make it dark until the sun goes a little bit more to the west, because usually in noon time, so then it's dark. But here it's not going to be dark because it's on an angle. It's not precisely straight. It's wider at the bottom and narrow at the top. So there it's not going to be all dark until it gets a little bit further towards the west. So, and the Mefarshim explained what it have to do with the walls over here, isn't it? Time it's Manim, the Ritva. But basically, that there it was different. The walls got darker, not exactly at Chatzos. It got darker a half hour later. So therefore, that's why the Kamatama was only at Sheish Nefs. Or another approach you could say, Shani Avram. Avram is different. You know why he did it in the beginning of the 7th hour, meaning at 12, not at 12:30? Is because the Stagnin is Gedei L'Hoysa B'Liboy. Avram Avinu was very proficient in knowing the constellations, and he knew how to calculate exactly the hours and the Zmanim, as the Bryce teaches in Baba Basin of the 7 days. And it says, Vashem Be'ech has Avram B'Koil. So that means to say he was very intelligent, and all the Malchim Mizrach Amar, they all came to his door to ask him regarding astrology, and so on and so forth, and therefore because of that, he knew how to be precise, but most people couldn't, so therefore they could only do the Karmatam in a half hour later. Or now we have a third interpretation, you could say, Mishum Dezokim Yeshiv Yeshiva. From Avin is giving a El to the Talmud Chochem, he sat there in the yeshiva, and again, therefore he was very well versed, and he knew exactly at 12 o'clock it's time to daven mincha. But most people, like the Karban Talmud, they have to do a half hour later. When we find this, that it was Zaken Yesh B'Shiva. Dom Reb Chaim Chanin says, Me'meim Shel Aviseinu, from the days of our fathers, like Parsha Yeshivim, there never wasn't that there wasn't a yeshiva, an assembly of people learning together. Hayim Mitzrayim, when they were in Egypt, Yeshivim Mom, they had a yeshiva with them. Shemach says the pasuk in Shemais. Lech after as Zikne, so go and gather the elders of the Jewish people, which Zikne is always Zesh Shekhan Chachma. They had the Tamid Chachamim. Hayim B'Midbar. When they were in the Midbar, Yeshiva Mom did the yeshiva with them. Shemach says the pasuk in B'Midbar. It says Asvali Shivim Ish Mizikne, so go gather for me 70 people from the elders of the Jewish people. So again, Avram Avinu was also, like we answered, Zaken B'Yeshiv Yeshiva Hayim. Shemach says the pasuk in Bereshit, Avram Zaken B'Vayam. Avram was a Zaken. He came of age. Which again, Zaken means as Eshekana Chachma. So Yitzchak giving the Zaken B'Yeshiv Yeshiva Hashem, like it says the pasuk, Ki Zaken Yitzchak. Yitzchak was a Zaken, and Yaakov is the Zaken B'Yeshiv Yeshiva Hashem, like it says the pasuk. And he so covered him Zaken. His eyes were heavy from Zaken. But again, we interpret Zaken as Eshekana Chachma. Eliezer Avram Zaken B'Yeshiv Yeshiva. Even the slave of Avram Avinu, Eliezer, was also an elder who sat in yeshiva. Like it says in the pasuk, Avram said to his servant, Zikan Beisai, the elder of his house, he says Zikan Beisai, who ruled over everything that he had. Now, related, once we bring in Eliezer and talking about that he was a Talmud Chacham, he was a Zaken, El Yid, learning in yeshiva. So Amar Blazi says, Shemoishel B'Teres Rabbi. What's the mean Moishel B'Chal Shalai? He was Moishel B'Teres Rabbi. He had dominion over his teacher's teachings, meaning he was as Ibegazok the Shir, the Nuchzogir. He said over the Sheikh Fluli. Like it says in Bereshit, continue to talk about Eliezer, it says, Who Damascus Eliezer? So, literal translation, he was from Damascus. But Amar Blazi says, Damascus could be read, Shedoila Umashke, that he drew and he watered, Miteirase Shal Rabbi Lachem, from the teachings of his teacher to others, which that's the tricking of Damascus, Doila Umashke, which means that he drew from his teacher and then he gave it to other people. Now, continuing on what we said regarding Avram Avinu, Zaken B'Yeshiv Yeshiva, Samarab, says, Kam Avram Avinu Kol Torah Kula. Avram Avinu was Mekayim, he fulfilled the entire Torah. Shemai says the pasuk in Bereshit, Ekev Hashashama Avram B'Koil B'Gami, because Avram Avinu heard my voice, etc., which the pasuk continues over there by Yishma B'Shmarti Mitzvayse Chukoyse B'Saroyse. Avram Avinu heard Hashem's voice, he kept the whole Torah. Now, Amalei Rav Shimon Bar Chila Rav, how do you know it meant that he kept the whole Torah? But the Aimah maybe say it's only the seven mitzvahs, the seven Noahide laws which were commanded to all the Bnei Noach, but maybe the Torah that wasn't given to him he didn't keep. Says Gemara, but how could you say it's only seven mitzvahs Bnei Noach? But we know that Hashem commanded him to do the bris milah. So that's obviously he didn't just do the seven mitzvahs Bnei Noach. Says okay, maybe seven mitzvahs milah. Maybe he did the seven Noahide laws and the mitzvah of circumcision. Amalei said to him and came, but then what did he do at the end of the pasuk? Mitzvayse b'seiraisai lamali. So what does it mean, my commandments and my Torah? Obviously, he kept the whole Torah. Now, more of Amar Rava is the gears of Itim Ravashi and Ravashi. Kaim Avram Avinu Afile Eruvi Tavshilon. Avram Avinu kept even the halacha, the rabbinic law of a Eruvi Tavshilon, which is that if you want to cook from one day to the next, and I'll cook, but if you make an Erev Tavshilon that you started already cooking from beforehand, so then you could continue. Shenema, where do we know that he kept even Erev Tavshilon? Torah Sai. It says in the plural, my Torahs. What is that? Achat Torah Shabiksav. Achat Torah Shabapeh, and Torah Shabapeh refers to even, and that's the primary terminology, and the Rambam, Achas Divrei Seifim is maybe some Gir Soyis have it, but the point is that that's the rabbinic law, even the Erev Tavshilon is included in what Avram Avinu was Mekayim. Now, going back to the halacha of the Mishnah, we said that Masim and Shmuel Eimer B'chulu, that they said that, oh, did it illuminate all the way up until Chevron, and he says that yes. Now, what exactly is the conversation? Who said yes? In other words, if it's the one on the roof, what do you mean he's saying yes? Because if you read the words in the Mishnah, Masim and Shmuel says, Heir Pnei Kol HaMizrach, Ad Shebechevron, B'Oy Mehen. If you read it simply, we translate a certain way. We put in like there's a question over there, but if you read it straight, it says he's saying Heir Pnei Kol HaMizrach, Ad Shebechevron, and B'Oy Mehen. So he's saying it led up to the west, to the east, and they're saying yes. Who's they? And that is, if you're saying that Hachtakai Egri, the one on the roof, he said it lit up to Chevron, and yes, Hu Chalam Vu Mafasher, where he's dreaming and he's interpreting the dream. What do you mean? He's asking and answering. What does it mean? Why is he saying yes? Who's saying yes to himself? Ela Hachtakai, rather than you're saying that it's the one on the ground. I mean, he said it lit up to Chevron, and one on the ground saying yes. But Manoyah, how did the guy on the ground know to say yes? So something about you could translate it both ways. If you want, you could say he's talking about the one that's on the ground. If you want, you could say it's the one on the roof. As follows. If you want, you could say it's the one on the roof, because you have to read like this. Amar Ihu. First, the one on the roof would say, and this is the way we read it when we said the Mishnah. The whole eastern front has lit up. That's it. The next words, he didn't say those words. You have to read it with a period over there. Then the one on the ground said to the one on the roof, so it's a shaila. Oh, all the way up until Chevron? And he would say yes. That's interpretation number one. If you want to say, no, it's Haftikaya. The one who would say hen is the one on the ground. So what's the conversation? Because Amar Ihu, the one on the ground, he's the first one to talk. He said, Hey, Pnei Kol HaMizrach? And there was a question. He said, did the whole eastern front light up? The guy on the roof said, oh, but Chevron. And then the guy on the ground, he would say, oh, hen, yes, that's exactly what I meant to ask. As we find in Talmud Yerushalmi, that why did they ask about Chevron? So to be maskis chosavis, who they are buried in Chevron. And the way of remembering, calling that when you start Avodah, they would say about Chevron, but it was there's two different ways of interpreting what Masim Mecheresh was saying regarding the conversation between the one on the roof and the one on the ground. Now the Mishnah had said, what made us come to this? That we had to go on the roof and check if it's morning. Where did we ever find such precautions? So we said because one time it happened that they mixed up and they thought the moon was the sun and they had to take the base straight. The problem is, says, me michlef? Is it really confusing the sprouting of the rays of the sun with the sprouting of the rays of the moon to confuse the two of them? But the Tanya in the Rabbi Shloimy Schwartzberg says, you can't compare the rays of the moon, the Timur Shel Chama, to the rays of the sun. Why? Timur Shel Levana, the rays of the moon, mitama ba'ili kamakol, goes straight up like a rod. Whereas Timur Shel Chama, regarding the rays of the sun, when you have Ba'alesa Shachar, when it's breaking forth the sun, mafzi lakan lakan, it actually diffuses to many different directions. It doesn't appear straight. So how could they have confused the rays of the sun for the rays of the moon? So Rabbi Shloimy says because what it was a cloudy day, and you didn't see the rays because of the clouds. Rather, you saw it scattered wherever the clouds had an opening. Oh, and therefore, maftzila kan lakan. So therefore, it looked like it was scattered, which made us think it was like the sun. But the truth really was really the moon. So why didn't it come straight like a rod? It was because the clouds were blocking it. My Papa says, oh, Shema Minoah, we can infer from this, from the fact that you're saying that on a cloudy day, that then whatever it is breaks through in many different places, even let's say the moon, which normally would go straight, now that something blocking it and then it scatters. So Yoma Daf comes out that a cloudy day is Kulei Shimsha. It's actually all sun. What does that mean? Even in this shadowy place, the sun breaks through in any place, and it doesn't go through the normal window it normally goes through. Because here where the clouds are blocking it, so it just scatters all over the place, and it breaks through in any crack it could get. So what's the difference that you're saying that on a cloudy day, really the sun is getting you everywhere because it's cracking through everywhere? What's the ramification of that? Says the Gemara, the difference is regarding if you want to spread out height to dry them up, it's a very good day because the sun is really coming everywhere. Where another approach says the Gemara, like Rav expounded. A woman should not need on Pesach, hardo, the sun, and not in where it's the heat of the sun, which that's here, even though it's not a sunny day, but it's going to be actually hotter than you think because although the clouds are blocking, it's actually breaking through everywhere, which related to this, Rabbi Nachman, it says, Zuama de Shimsha, so to speak, the filth of the sun, which is that heat of a cloudy day, which you don't think it's sunny because you don't see the sun, but actually it's Kashim B'Shim is actually even harsher than the sun itself. Because again, it's cracking through everywhere and it's coming out strong through the holes. The Samanech and the mnemonic is Donna de Challah, is that a jar of vinegar, which if you close it very, very tight, I mean, people like doing this when they make the horseradish, the mudu, for the side enough, you do it very tightly closed so that the aroma should not come out and get weakened. Now when you make a small little hole in this jar of vinegar, it comes in a very gross geruch, a very strong odor, a very strong smell. So to a cloudy day, because the sun is blocked, so it's like holding in the sun. So wherever you're going to have a small little hole in the crack in the clouds, it's going to come in very strong through there, and therefore that day is actually more harmful for the UV rays, for whatever it is, than the actual sunny day because it's just piercing through those holes in the clouds. Now, once we talk about that something is more harsh than other things, the Gemara says a whole list of different things. Shaviri de Shimsha, the blinding of the sun, which is the sun that, again, like we said, that breaks through the holes in the small clouds. If someone looks opposite those holes, it's kashu, it's harsher for blindness, mishimsha, than if someone is looking straight at the sun in the sky. Again, because it's the same idea that it's breaking through very strong, concentrated in those holes. And for some manech, and the manech to remember this is dilfa, is dripping, meaning it's harsher, the drip that drops on the person, than if the whole water just washes over at one time. Because it's like drip, 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 it's concentrated in one spot. As we continue to Chav and Aleph, Hihuri Avera, a very well-known concept, that the thoughts of sin, meaning the lust for women, thinking about it, is kashu, is harsher to weaken a person's body, me'avera, more than the action of engaging in those activities. The samanech, and the man to remember this is reicha de bisra. If someone smells roasted meat, the aroma it's harmful on his body because he desires it more than the meat itself. So here, whereas the desire, the lust, thinking about the women is more harsher than the aver itself, which is many agadic interpretations and Musar insights into that idea too. Shili de Kaita, the end of the summer, which is El, which is the end of the summer, is Kasha. The heat is harsher, Mikaita, than the heat of the summer itself in like the month of Tammuz. Because what happened is that the whole climate has already been heated up and people's bodies have been heated up the whole summer long. So now, even just with a little heat, already is harmful for the person. And the Simanek and the Manik to recall this is Tanura Shagira, is a heated oven. Where if you have an oven that was heated up already once and twice and three times in that day, it's so hot. It's very easy to heat it up with just a little amount of wood. Here too, at the end of the summer, it's like it's more harmful than in the heat of the summer itself. Ishta the Sisva, a fever during the winter months that heats up the sick person is kasha. You know that definitely it's more harmful than midikaita, than it is in the summertime, because it's that what heats you up in the summertime. V'samanech and the manik to recall this is tanur krira, is a cold oven. Meaning a cold oven, you need a lot of wood to heat it up. Here also, where it's cold outside, the body's cold, and still the fever is heating up the person, you know that obviously this is a severe illness that the person has. Migmer ba'atikta is also a famous concept that someone wants to learn on the old stuff that he's learned. Meaning someone learned something already, and he forgot about it, he didn't pay attention to it for a long time. And he wants to learn the old schayr, the old stuff that he had learned, is kasha. It's more difficult to go back and to learn what he forgot, than to learn something new that he never learned before. Samanech, and the malik to recall this is tina bar tina, is cement, is clay that you already made the plaster for an old wall. It's much harder to grind it down and make the plaster than it is to make from new earth, because it's altazach and it doesn't go back together as well again. And therefore that's the same thing with learning old.
The Malach learns with the Yoma said because it's easier to learn what you forgot than not, which is the opposite.
As you recall. Yeah, I hear. Could be that's different. Why is that different? Maybe because it's a malach. Who knows? So this we discussed in today's Daf Yomi Daf Chavchas. We said that the second version of the question of Rabbi Zera on Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan said that Azad that organized the Malachis in Michayev Misa. Here, this version 2.0 was a different question. Not like the first version had Ayat Avodas Balayla, but Yesh Achre Avodah. You have after another Avodah, how could you be Chayev Misa? Yevarm B'Dar. You don't have anything after that. The Trumas Hadeshin is not after. Yevarm B'Dar is the end of the Avodah Zayin. Trumas Hadeshin is the beginning of the next day. I have Trumas Hadeshin that you have to after the Haitzaz Hadeshin. No, Trumas Hadeshin is the beginning of Avodah Zayin. Has nothing to do with the Haitzaz Hadeshin. This is a new start, and therefore there's nothing after it. So rather, says the Gemara, you're right. It was actually going on the two Gizarim of Eitzim. That's what Yechon says Allah. If the Zar does that, it's Michayev Misa, because that's not with the Tama. That's the end of the Avodah. Then Rava asked them, why did you require a pious from the Atzmai? Oh, that's because you need it for the Trumas Hadeshin to incentivize the Trumas Hadeshin. But you're right, you would have had it because it has the two variables. That sounds like from Rava that to have a pious, you need to have this two things of Avodah Tama and Zar Chayev Misa. What's with Shchita? Shchita is not Zar Chayev Misa and it has a pious. That's of course the beginning of Avodah Zayin. What's Yevarm B'Dar? That's like we said before, that it's considered the safe Avodah Zayin. And what's with Trumas Hadeshin? You're right, that's because Ma'aser Shayir. You're right, Trumas Hadeshin would not have had a pious because it's not the it's not Avodah Tama, at least according to that Mandamar in the Gemara. But the Gemara says there's no raya to Rabbi Yochanan that Shnei Gizar Eitzim is considered Avodah Tama because they say it's Avodah Zalayla, and what would the raya be? Because they didn't say Tzuru'u. Why not? Obviously because it's Avodah Zalayla. It's not true. It could be Avodah Zayin. So why don't you say that go and check? Because you could be Masakin, so therefore we didn't have to. But the Shchit, there's no way of being Masakin, therefore they had to go ahead and check. This is courtesy of my daughter, Liba. You see, I can't do this. Hanalach Perik, Berishayna, Zashayna, Siyam. And we started the third parak. Amalam Mamuna, that if the Mamuna said to them every morning, go ahead and check if it's Zman Shchita, which said Barka, yeah, it's already dawn. Some say that he would say here Pinikol Mesach, which many different versions. Barka, later everyone went to work, ready to get workers. And the reason why they did this was because one time they made a mistake and they had to bring in the Beis Sapsul, so the Beis Sapsul, and therefore they went to check. And they would tell the Kohen Gadol to go down to the Beis Tefillah. We said in general, whoever had to relieve himself, had to toivel, whoever urinated, there's not relying. We spoke about the Tefillah of Avram Avinu, of Mincha, was Mechimash Chikais, was already mamish by noontime. And generally we learn from Avram Avinu, like we find by there's reasons from Mila, like we learn that from Rav Yashma, from Rav Baker. So why over here do we only do the Karban Tumen from 6.5 hours into the day? Why do we daven Mincha only? No one davens Mincha b'chatzas. Only daven a half hour later by, we call Mincha Gedayla. Why don't we learn from Avram Avinu? 3 reasons. Either because in the Beis HaMikdash, it wasn't Mechimashri costly until it was a half hour later because the walls were on the slant. And if it was straight, it would already be, the walls would be dark already at noontime. Or Avram Avinu is different because as it's like Ninja Gedayla, he could chop exactly when it is. So he could do by chatzos, but us, we're not so we have to do a half hour later. Okay, Avram Avinu is Zakon Yesh B'Shiva, so that's another reason why he knew why he was different, but we wait a half hour later. We also said that Avram Avinu is Zakon Yesh B'Shiva, like we said, there was always the yeshiva, and Mitzrayim, the Midbar, the Uvas, Glen, yeshiva, they learned sugyas. Eliezer was also Zakon Yesh B'Shiva, and he was like, it's positive, Moshe B'chol HaShaloi, was B'chol HaShaloi, was B'Teres Rabbi. And the Mesek means Doyle Mashke, B'Terose Shal Rabbi. We saw Avram Avinu has become called to Kulim and Tefshul, like it says Torah, so even Torah Shabbat Peh. And this that they made a mistake with Levana, how does that make sense? Didn't we say that the rays are different? Since it was a cloudy day, and a cloudy day you can't tell the difference because it just gets scattered because of the clouds. And we concluded with discussion regarding one thing that's more harsh than the other, which you would have thought a cloudy day the sun is not as strong, but it breaks through. And many different things, like famous teaching, Hura Avera is most of it Avera. Learning old things can teach an old dog new tricks. You know what I'm saying? It's this Shved, it's Sealand and Altazachen for instead of new things. Thank you to anytime for hosting us.